And welcome to Car Con Carne. I'm James Van Osdell, still doing this at home for right now. It's quarantine con carne again. Obviously, with Delta being what it is, I've pulled back from doing stuff in the car for the time being. Realistically, none of my guests want to sit in my car and share pizzas and jalapeno poppers and fried chicken with me in that kind of close quarters. So I spent 15 months doing this podcast from right here in my home. I'll keep doing it until signs say that it's okay to go back in the car and record from there. So that's the plan. Tonight's show, this week's show. Actually, I'm doing a few this week. This particular episode brought to you by Siren Records McHenry. I just saw the new Cap Gun Heroes video recorded there. That looks super cool. And I also just got a new amplifier from Siren Records McHenry. Besides being a cool record store, they have all this cool vintage gear. Check it out. That is Siren Records in McHenry. Before I get into Car Con Carne for this episode, I should mention just this past week, I launched Car Con Carne's sister podcast, the companion podcast, the Music of Chicago podcast, musicofchicago.com. It's on Apple, Google, etc. What this is it's a podcast dedicated to the breadth of Chicago music. It's not limited by genre. It's not limited by language or profanity. It is unique in that it is a music podcast. If you think about it, you don't hear songs in podcasts, and that's because of copyrights and publishing issues with ownership. Very real things. Podcasts are mechanical downloads, which means when someone downloads your show, they're downloading all the content, which if you put copyrighted content into it, that's a problem. So that said, this podcast is very unique. Music of Chicago. All the songs you hear on this podcast have been granted by the publishing rights owners, and I have express permission to use the song. So it's super cool. It's like a radio show because there's music, and it's completely listenable on your own schedule. Music of Chicago, the companion podcast. As for this podcast, which I've been doing for going on 8 years, something special is going on if I'm wearing a button-down shirt. Something significant is happening on this show, and that something significant is Marcus Norris. He is the Chicago Philharmonic's new composer in residence. Marcus, lovely to see you. I'm dressed up for you because we're talking about orchestral stuff. We're talking about symphonic pieces. I mean,
I missed the memo, man.
I didn't want to be the one who was more underdressed. I felt like because you've got the legit title. I needed to step up a little bit. So Glory, composed by Marcus Norris, is part of the Chicago Philharmonic season opening production Out of the Silence. It's happening Sunday at the North Shore Center for the Performing Arts. It features pieces by Mozart, Norris. I mean, some pretty cool company as far as composers go. And Marcus, let's just start there. We'll start with Glory. We talked right before I started recording. Classical to me has always been kind of a blind spot. And I think it's something that people need to have introduced to them. I think it's hard for people to just stumble into classical. They need someone to kind of point them in the right direction. I never had that person. My parents never said, oh, you should listen to Brahms. It was never part of my world. So I've recognized this for a while as a blind spot and something I want to know more about. I listened to Glory, and I don't know how to describe the music you make. I mean, to my uninformed ears, it sounds like I'm listening to a story.
I thought it's very much a story. And first off, like everything you're saying is so true and spot on. I have a lot of strong feelings about like classical music, and I didn't grow up on classical music either. So my background is I grew up on like R&B and rap and hip hop and all these things. And I didn't really get an introduction to classical music until I was like already in college. And I don't tell everybody this, but I didn't even learn how to read music until I was like 19, 20.
Get out of here.
Yeah. Because
you're not that much older than that now, right?
No, I just turned 30. So about like 10 years.
Okay.
So it's like, but it's because of those things you're talking about is like, a lot of us don't really get introductions, and I put the blame on classical music or the institutions around them, not necessarily making efforts to speak to the young folks, especially like, there's a lot of movements now about like speaking to like different races and these things, but like up until very recently, it was like 99% old European white guys, you know what I mean, that have been dead for like 200 years,
right?
Which I love their music. It's just, that's not the world,
So, I mean, you grew up listening to rap and R&B, and
Mhm.
you eventually found this music. What was it about classical that spoke to you and set you down this path of composing?
It's the way it's put together. And I will say, like, I still do R&B. I still produce R&B and orchestrate. I just did some orchestrations on this guy, and I think the record came out on Motown. His name is LA. He's an R&B artist. And I just did like some strings for this guy named Ant Clemens, who I'm a big fan of, R&B guy. I work with the Chicago duo named Drama. They just play Lala. I like did some strings on like their records and stuff. So I still do, like, for clarity, I still do like all those other musics too. Because a lot of times I tell the story and people think it's like you moved up to classical, and I don't think about it that way. I just, you know what I mean? It's like I just I don't know. I always say the genres are for listeners or for critics or these things. It's like
Yes.
it's like for the creators, it's like we just like the music. But for me, for classical music, it was like it was the way it was being put together. Like, and I still remember it was Bach was the one that got me into classical music, because Bach is like it's like just so masterfully put together with the different voices, like in counterpoint. So if any of the listeners don't know counterpoint, it's like, you might know in elementary school they had you sing like a round, where it's like you start singing something and then your classmates start singing the same line like 2 beats later, and then
Like row, row, row your boat.
exactly, and you
Okay.
start getting like 4 people, and then it's like, but Bach is doing like very, very complicated versions of that, where it's like the same line could be like put against the same line in like this super complicated way. And it just like, it blew my mind, like the technical side of it, the way it was put together. And like you said, it's like, I think you can tell longer musical stories, or like that's more like about the music in classical music versus R&B or rap, where it's like you can tell very good, like, you know, profound stories, but it's usually like I'm going straight to the core of the story. And like classical, you can be a little more abstracted and kind of take your time with it.
Right. There's a build.
There's a build, and then also it's like you can write like, it can be like a 20-minute piece or something, you know. It's like if I make a 20-minute R&B song, I'll like it, my mom will like it, and that's it.
That's exactly right. Well, I said it sounds like listening to a story. Again, speaking about this piece, Glory, it seems almost playful at times too.
It is. So my inspiration behind, like, the story behind writing Glory, it was premiered in 2019, and it was my first orchestral commission at the time, and it was with my hometown orchestra, the Jackson Symphony Orchestra, and they challenged me to write a piece inspired by, or like to kind of fit on a program with Beethoven's first piano concerto. And I'm like, okay, no pressure.
Yeah, right.
And so I got to thinking about it for a while, and I'm like, okay, I am a 20-something young Black man, and Beethoven was like an old, you know, white man in Germany, hundreds of years ago, just a grumpy old guy. Love his music, you know, he's obviously the greatest, but it's like, I'm like, we have very different life experience. And I'm like, and what other medium would those two people be supposed to make the same thing, you know? And so I thought about it, and I was like, instead of trying to mimic Beethoven, let me like think about what I like about Beethoven. And one of the things that is profound to me about Beethoven is he was like the first composer that would have been like, he would have considered himself to be a great artist expressing himself. Like before Beethoven, it would have been weird to hear like a sad piece of music and be like, the composer must be sad. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it just wasn't how they thought about music. Like for like Mozart and them. So like when Mozart wrote something that sounds sad, it just, that's what the job needed. That, you know. But with Beethoven, it's like if you heard like a sad piece of music, he was the first one where it would be like, are you okay?
Do a wellness. You have to do a wellness check.
Exactly. And now that's normal. It's like if you hear somebody playing like sad music all day, it's just, you check on them. But Beethoven is kind of the composer that gave us that. So I tried to draw from that. Like, and it's like we hear some of Beethoven's music and like we consider him to be like the hero on the journey, you know what I mean? And some of his big symphonies. So I tried to tap into that for Glory. It's kind of inspired by trying to reach triumph despite adversity, and try to just like go on this. I don't know. It's not programmatic the way there was like this happens and then this is this, or it's not like step by step like that. But as part of the reason that, like, when I was commissioned, I didn't get commissioned to write a concerto. It was just an orchestra piece, and then I asked if I could make a concerto. And then for those listening that don't know, a concerto is like soloist kind of versus an orchestra. So the soloist in our case here with the Chicago Phil next weekend will be this amazing violinist named Ngioma Grievous, just a monster player. But it's kind of like she's kind of on this journey that unfolds in this piece with the orchestra, kind of like sometimes they're against her. Sometimes I kind of try to portray like her inner monologue. They kind of become like the voices echoing in her head at certain parts. I don't know how much of that comes through that way, but that's how I was thinking about it.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, thematically, the way you described the vibe and the message and the emotion that went into it. I mean, I can't imagine a more emblematic theme for our current times. I mean, it seems like the right piece at the right time.
Thank you. I mean, I just try to write stuff. I always try to write from the heart, because I had a mentor when I was living in Chicago. Like I was kind of, I have all these interests and all these like varied musical interests. And I did a concert while I was there, and half of it was like instrumental classical pieces, and then half of it was like artists around the city that I was like producing for. I kind of did like I arranged like a acoustic jazz quartet with like a string quartet, and then had the singers and rappers perform with that for the other half of the concert. And I was like worried about it before. I'm like the people that are going to come for the classical stuff aren't going to like the R&B or the rap, and the people that come for that aren't going to like the instrumental. But they ended up like everybody liked everything. And then I had a mentor tell me, like afterwards, he was like, "What's from the heart reaches the heart." And then it just always stuck with me. So now it's like every time I try something, I try to write like, I just try to write from the heart. And then about like Beethoven and Mozart, I think that's what they did, and I think that's why their music is still here, and that's why us being so different, I can still love their music. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It can still like hit you in a profound way.
I talk to a lot of more rock-based musicians on this podcast. I love to talk to everybody. It's just the way things have worked out. But when I talk to a songwriter who, punk rock band, the person who writes the song gets up on stage and they let it all out. It's their composition. They let it flow through them. I don't have context for what it might feel like for someone like you, who gets to watch this play out in this big bombastic way, something that you workshopped in your studio or by the side of your bed, something you put together in your own head. What does that feel like to see it put together? Like we'll see at the North Shore Center on Sunday.
Terrifying. Terrifying, because it's like I've been a performer. I play piano and these things, but I felt like I felt like I've worked very, very hard to be mediocre at piano. I still write at the piano, and I still jam, and I still play, and I conduct. Out here in LA, I started an orchestra with the worst timing called Southside Symphony, and basically to where we could just play all of this stuff. Like I played like Juvenile's Back That Thing Up. I played some Beethoven, but with string orchestra, and not just like, you know what I mean, like with like masterful orchestration. I just thought it would be cool, and like anything I think of, we play it. But we did our first concert like February 21st, 2020. So of course, immediately just shut down. And so, but anyway, but I don't know. I just so I conduct and I do that part of it, but it's like for composing, I just feel like it's all the nervousness that comes with those guys that you're talking about performing with none of the control.
Yeah. I can see that.
And it's also like I don't know where I'm at right now in my like composition. It's like with Glory or with some other stuff I'm working on. It's like the last few years, the pieces have become so vulnerable. Like I said, this one is like literally like some of it is like literally like inner monologue to me is what it feels like. Um, and it's like, hey, let's go share that with, let's have like 40 people play that to like hundreds of people in a room. You know what I mean? So it's kind of terrifying in that way, but I don't know. I love one of the things I love about music, I think many of us love about music, is like the bringing people together universally.
Absolutely.
So I love it, but it's scary is the short answer.
So is it one of those things where if you're watching the performance the night of, kind of looking through your eye like this, you got your hand over your face?
I started like, I kind of like try to just be, I kind of nowadays just try to let it carry me away, I guess.
Yeah.
Like I usually like lately I just find myself just kind of like closing my eyes and just kind of getting swept up in it.
But you said it, just that communal feeling. I mean, the past year,
I've missed
past year
it.
plus was rough, but yeah, to get all those people in the room who are just excited to share the music. I mean, there's nothing like it. It's why we all do what we do.
Exactly. And the musicians too. Like I consider myself like to be like very cognizant of the musicians all the time. It's like when I write, I literally say all the time, it's like when I'm writing something for a musician, like if you're gonna play a Marcus Norris piece, even if it's like a classical piece, I want you to feel like a rock star.
Yeah.
like Ngioma, like this piece is like she plays it, man. But so I always tell people, because I also produce, and it's like part of the difference that I like about like doing orchestral stuff is like, yeah, we can make amazing sounds nowadays on our computers or like at home, but it's like there's nothing like 50 professional musicians listening to each other and all here trying to make it this one sound. You know what I mean? It's just different.
Sold. All right. So Sunday, oh my gosh.
Well,
Thank you. The 12th. This is Labor Day week. So because there was a holiday on Monday, I have no concept of what day it is or what the dates are this week. Sunday the 12th at the North Shore Center for the Performing Arts in Bucolic, Skokie, Illinois. Out of the Silence. It is the season opening production of the Chicago Philharmonic. You will see the piece Glory, composed by my guest, Marcus Norris there. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk and share your insight on this stuff. I really loved having you on.
It's been really fun, man. Anytime, and hopefully one time we get to do it where there's like food involved. I've watched some of the other one. I was real jealous.
Well, yeah, we got to get you back to Chicago when things aren't weird, and we'll feed you. We'll go to some old haunts, or maybe we'll find some place that you didn't go to when you lived here.
I'd love that, man. And then if anybody listening comes check out the concert and they have any questions for me, I'll be there. They can ask me whatever. I love that type of stuff.